This is the moment you won't see coming. Just when you think it's all over, a shocking turn changes everything. What happens when a father, a daughter, and an entire community take matters into their own hands? Wait until you see how this ends. Stay with us and watch how a single act of kindness can change everything. The irate HOA president pinned my epileptic daughter against our gate, keeping her and her service dog from coming into our house. She didn't realize I was watching. She didn't realize I was Assistant Commissioner of Police. Now she'll realize what happens if you play with my child. Here's full story comment below from where you're watching also. Like and subscribe for more stories. The metal gate pushed aggressively into Ava's back as Mrs. Holloway's finger poked into her chest. My daughter's service dog Beacon whined uncomfortably, unable to assist, while the HOA president stood in their way. Home, I don't care what your father said. You know dogs in common areas, it's in big letters in the rules that your family believes don't concern you. I saw this occur from my vehicle. I had just turned in after working a long 14-hour shift. The image of my 14-year-old daughter who had epilepsy being pinned against our fence enraged me. I hadn't felt that emotion in years. Mrs. Holloway stood with her back to me. Some neighbors had collected, appearing concerned, but not assisting. My daughter's face was tear-stained, her shaking hands holding Beacon's vest. Please, I overheard Ava whisper with a trembling voice as I approached quietly. Beacon is an assistance animal the Fair Housing Act safeguards. Don't you dare mention legislation to me. Mrs. Holloway's voice grew louder. She shoved her hand against AA's shoulder, pinning her harder into the gate. I've been a paralegal for 23 years. Your internet-bought fake dog vest doesn't trump our rules. I was close when I spoke. My voice steady but menacing, the tone my officers recognized meant trouble was brewing. Take your hands off my daughter now. Mrs. Holloway turned around, surprised at first but quickly looking confident again. When she saw me, to her, I was just Thomas Riley, the quiet single dad who worked some government job and rarely attended HOA meetings. Mr. Riley, good timing. I was just explaining your daughter that her emotional support animal trick won't. Patricia, I cut her off, using her first name on purpose. You have 3 seconds to back away from my child before I arrest you for attacking a minor and violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. She laughed like she thought I was kidding, but sounded uncertain. Arrest me? How could you do that? I moved closer and removed my jacket, revealing the badge and gun holster I hadn't had time to lock in my car. Assistant Commissioner Riley, Metropolitan Police Department. I just saw you push my disabled daughter and tamper with her service animal. Everyone gasped. Mrs. Holloway's face registered many emotions: shock, embarrassment, and ultimately a frantic attempt to save face. I didn't know you were a police officer, she stuttered. That shouldn't matter, I said sternly. What should matter is that you're violating federal law by keeping a service animal from being with an individual who has a disability. I turned to the gawking neighbors. Mrs. Patel, would you please assist Ava inside? And Mr. Guzman, since you've been taping this, I'd appreciate a copy of that video for my report. Mrs. Holloway's eyes widened when I referenced the video. Now wait a minute. No, you wait. I stopped her moving closer for 2 years. I've documented every time you harassed my daughter, every nasty letter about Beacon tonight. You escalated from harassment to physical violence, and you did it to a child with an illness. I pointed in the direction of our home. That internet vest you ridiculed. It's registered with the Department of Justice. Beacon had 1,500 hours of training to sense Ava's seizures before they occurred. He saved her life 3 times. Mrs. Holloway appeared to lose her battle, abruptly aware of her trouble around us. Neighbors, who had remained quiet, began to speak up. She's been bullying that poor girl for months, someone complained. I raised my hand for quiet. Mrs. Holloway, go home now. You'll be hearing from the HOA board, the police, and my lawyer in that order. She opened her mouth but quickly walked away, her fancy shoes clicking on the pavement. I took a deep breath and confronted the neighbors. Thank you to those who attempted to assist, for those who simply stood by. Do better next time within our home. Ava sat on the couch with Beacon's head in her lap, her hands still trembling. Mrs. Patel had made her tea. She's calmer now, Mrs. Patel said as I entered. I'll go home so the two of you can speak after she departed. I sat next to my daughter, noticing the red mark on her shoulder where Mrs. Holloway had shoved her. I'm so sorry, Dad, Ava whispered near tears again. I was just walking Beacon before dinner. Like always, you have nothing to be sorry for, I said to her. What Mrs. Holloway did was illegal and very cruel. Ava stroked Beacon's coat thoughtfully. Why does she dislike us so much we never did anything to her? I had wondered many times Patricia Holloway had made it her mission to look for faults with us from the day we moved in. The only single father and disabled child in the upscale neighborhood, some people are afraid of what makes them uncomfortable. I said tactfully, your epilepsy, Beacon. These things remind her that life is uncertain. That's a stupid reason to be cruel, Ava said bluntly. I laughed despite everything. Yes, it is. The next morning I made some phone calls from my home office before leaving for work. By noon, things were stirring. 3 days later, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. The community center was filled with neighbors, many of whom were wearing purple epilepsy awareness ribbons. Board Chairman Douglas Wilson began by issuing a public apology to Ava, who sat next to me with Beacon at her feet. What Ava Riley and her service dog have done is antithetical to everything our community should stand for. He said strongly, the board has reviewed security footage, witness accounts, and the laws. Our decision is not in doubt. He paused, looking straight at Mrs. Holloway, who sat rigidly in the front row. Patricia Holloway is being removed from office as HOA president, effective immediately. Also, the board will cooperate fully with any legal proceedings the Riley family chooses to pursue. Murmurs of approval spread through the room. Mr. Wilson wasn't finished. We're also mandating training for all board members on disability loss. And lastly, we're establishing a new accessibility committee, which we hope Ava might join when she's ready. The meeting progressed with neighbors standing up and speaking about their own experiences with Mrs. Holloway's unjust leadership. Our situation was only the final straw for community ire. Afterwards, neighbors approached us with apologies. Mr. Guzman handed me a flash drive with his security footage, showing 6 other instances when she confronted Ava. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Holloway had severe repercussions. The district attorney charged her with assaulting a minor in violation of disability protections and harassment. The video testimony and witnesses, she could not deny what she had done. The judge was stern with her. Mrs. Holloway was fined $5,000, 200 hours community service at a disability center, and 1 year on probation. She was also forced to pay for Ava's therapy sessions. The court required her to stay at least 100 feet away from Ava. Unless Ava permitted her closer, any breach would see her go to jail. The news of her sentence spread throughout the neighborhood. Quickly, most felt justice had been served. The local newspaper even wrote an article about it, labeling it a landmark case for disability rights. Later that evening, Ava appeared in the kitchen doorway. Dad, I've been thinking about that committee Mr. Wilson spoke about, the accessibility one. She nodded. I want to do it not just for us, but for others who might move here. What if a family with a child in a wheelchair wants to live here someday? I felt so proud. Despite everything, my daughter was thinking of others first. If you're ready for that job, I'll support you all the way. Her face lit up with purpose. I'm ready. 1 month later, I watched Ava walk Beacon along the community path, the same place where Mrs. Holloway had confronted her today. Ava was walking with Caroline, a 9-year-old who used arm crutches because of cerebral palsy. They had quickly become friends over their shared experiences. The accessibility committee had already made several improvements. The gravel paths had been replaced with smooth pavement, ramps were installed at the clubhouse, signs and braille signs had been placed. As I saw Mrs. Holloway's vehicle came up beside the walkway, my body went taut immediately. The window rolled down and she stretched out. Excuse me, she said to Ava. Ava lost the defensive edge but gained the calmness of a quiet knowing. Yes, Mrs. Holloway, I approached them but left enough space not to intrude. I owe you an apology. Mrs. Holloway explained, her voice minus its normal cut edge. Not merely for the day, but for what came before it. Ava remained mute, waiting. I'd been taking the required classes, the HOA mandating, Mrs. Holloway continued, and I just received some bad news, medical news. Something passed across her face and made me halt. This wasn't the Mrs. Holloway that had pinned my daughter. The doctor says I have early onset Parkinson's, she said, whispering. In a few years, I may need help too. Aya's expression softened a bit. I'm sorry to hear that. Mrs. Holloway nodded, then saw Caroline. Is this your friend? Yes, this is Caroline. She had just moved into the blue house on Maple Court. Unexpectedly, Mrs. Holloway smiled at Caroline. Welcome to the neighborhood you've already met, our best resident. Caroline was perplexed, but Ava blushed slightly at the compliment. The pads looked much improved with the new paving. Mrs. Holloway continued, Your committee is doing good work. With that, she drove off, leaving the two girls gazing after her in astonishment. Later, Ava described the encounter. Do you think she's really changed, Dad? I pondered. This seriously, people can change when life forces them to look at things from a different perspective. Sometimes it takes looking through another pair of eyes to see their reality, like how she'll need help someday too. Exactly, though it's sad it took a diagnosis to generate empathy. Ava was quiet for a moment. I'm still angry about what she did, but I'm also sort of happy she may get it. Now 6 months on from the event, our community held a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new accessible playground. The first in our county, Ava delivered a brief speech on inclusion that made many of us cry. Differences aren't bad things, she concluded with Beacon by her side, standing proudly beside her. They're just different roads to the same destination, belonging as people made their way towards the food tables. I caught sight of Mrs. Holloway, standing alone observing children playing. Her hand trembled ever so slightly as she pushed hair from her face. A sign of her condition, Eva saw too. After a moment's consideration, she approached her former tormentor. Would you like to join us for lemonade? Mrs. Holloway, the older woman, seemed genuinely surprised after all I did. Why would you want me present? My daughter made an adjustment to Beacon service vest. Something she habitually did when collecting her thoughts. Because holding grudges wears you out, she said simply, and because one day you may need someone to treat you with kindness when you are struggling. Consider this practice for us both. Something softened in Mrs. Holloway's expression, a hardness yielding to softness. I'd like that. Thank you, as they strolled together toward the drinks table. I remained back feeling utterly proud. My daughter, who had every reason to remain angry, was taking the harder road, the road of compassion. The woman who had once confined her against our gate was now being led by her toward healing, not because she deserved it, but because Ava knew something that my years on the police force had sometimes led me to forget. Justice without mercy hurts everyone that day. Watching my daughter lead the way, I knew she had become the teacher, and I the student. My work had given me the power to punish. But Ava's wisdom had taught me the power of healing. Instead, the HOA Karen who had hurt us was now learning to cope with her own difficult path, and my incredible daughter was showing her a way through the darkness. Not because she had forgotten the hurt caused, but because she had decided to remember her own humanity. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't winning the battle, but holding out a hand after the war. And sometimes the strongest revenge isn't punishment, but the transformation of the person who hurt you and the community that let it occur. As I watched my daughter smiling with neighbors who had once stood silent while she was being harassed, I knew we'd accomplished something better than justice. We'd made a difference not only in rules and accessibility, but in hearts and minds. The next morning, I sat Ava on our porch with a notebook, jotting down ideas for the next community project. Beacon slept at her feet, his golden fur catching the sun. What are you doing? I asked, sitting beside her. A buddy system, she said, displaying her notes, for new kids with disabilities who move here, so they always have someone who knows. I smiled, remembering how far we'd come since that awful day. That's a great idea, Mrs. Holloway's assisting, Ava said matter-of-factly. She's good at getting things organized. I tried to suppress my surprise. How does that feel to work with her? Ava thought the question odd, but also right. Somehow her hands shake more now. Yesterday she couldn't open her water bottle during our meeting. She hesitated. I opened it for her, and no one made a big deal about it. That's the way it ought to be when someone needs assistance in that moment. Looking at my wise daughter, I felt a deep sense of peace. The woman who had once made Ava feel embarrassed was now facing her own vulnerability, And Ava, instead of taking pleasure in this turnabout, was softly demonstrating to her what real community is. "I'm proud of you," I said matter-of-factly. Ava smiled. "I learned from the best." But we both knew it wasn't the case in this. She had been the educator all along, while I had sought justice through retribution. She had discovered something much stronger: justice through transmutation. The gate where my daughter had once been pressed now stood adorned with bright handprints, a community painting among them. Two handprints side by side, one that belonged to my epileptic daughter and one that belonged to the woman who had once hurt her below them. A simple statement that Ava